probably saw it on the previous presentation. It was called myRightToPlay.com. It was a Flash game portal, but we stopped the project because around senior year, Steve, if you remember, Steve Jobs released the article about the death of Flash, and that kind of ushered the end of Adobe Flash and the breathing in of HTML5, which I'm going to be talking about. There's a lot of stuff apparently to cover with web development, so I'm just gonna grease by the very upper layers of web development because it's something that you have to be invested in. You have to do it every single day. So why do web dev? With web development, of course, you can make web applications and websites. Browsers are becoming so powerful that you can actually almost come close to the native performance of making a desktop program with a web application. But let's say you want to do some server-side application. You can do that with Node.js and also with PHP and Ruby on Rails. If you want to make desktop apps with the same skills that you know in web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Node.js, you can use Node WebKit, which is on a GitHub repository, and you can make desktop programs with that. You want to make a mobile app, you can use those same skill sets that I hope you're going to learn through this presentation and through by yourself with frameworks like Famous and Ionic. I actually have, you might have seen it also on the previous presentation, but I actually have an app here. I don't know how well you can see it. It's called Rate Me, which is kind of like a combination between Hot or Not and Instagram. And this is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript using Angular for model view controller kind of logic. But with Angular and Cordova, these kinds of skills are very reproducible skills that you can apply to all these different kinds of environments. So that shows you how versatile web dev is. If you're into database management, I'm personally not into database management, but if you want to do database management, you have MySQL for SQL, relational. You tend to do relational databases in SQL, and with NoSQL, everything is non-relational. Everything is kind of your own kind of structure goes database. Yeah.
So you know how PHP also does the server-side thing? Does Node.js kind of replace what PHP does?
Node.js, it's kind of kind of wrong to compare Node.js and PHP because what Node.js is imagine combining PHP, Apache, and other kind of plugins you would get with PHP. That kind of stack is called the Lattice stack for Linux, Apache, and MySQL and PHP. That's what Node.js is. It offers that full stack. Oh. It's not just capable of replacing PHP.
Okay. So
now,
it does more than what PHP does.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I personally started with PHP. I'm jumping into Node.js. Most people, if you go online, would hate Node.js because it's with JavaScript. I mean, you code with JavaScript, and JavaScript is a very quirky language. There's a lot. Yeah, it's fun, but there's a lot of quirks. Like the way it does inheritance is completely different. If you started programming with Java, when you jump to JavaScript, you'll find its inheritance kind of different to the world you know, because in Java everything is based on class inheritance. In JavaScript, everything is objects inheriting from objects. So if you code your JavaScript application right, you should be coding with less code. Also, the advantage of Node.js that makes people jump into Node.js is the fact that you can do events, kind of streaming, live data kind of stuff. You usually can't do that with PHP because you can do that kind of activity with PHP, but it would hit the server a lot because PHP was not meant for that. PHP was originally made as an extension for this older language called Perl, but no one uses Perl anymore. PHP kind of supplanted Perl. So that's what it was originally built for. Oh, also Node.js is just, it's a C++ wrapper on JavaScript. You code in JavaScript, but it's fast because it was coded on C++ using the V8 engine, which is the same JavaScript engine that runs on Google Chrome browsers. HTML. HTML is just the structure and the skeleton of whatever application you're you're making. It's meant to structure data, not design. I kind of hate this when I would F12 into websites and I would see people combining styles and HTML4 kind of markup into HTML. You should not do that. HTML is meant for two things. Servers to interpret what kind of data you have in your application or your website, or the browser rendering that markup into the browser viewport. You should not put any styles in that thing, because that thing is just meant to be a skeleton. You're dictating your browser or the search engine, whatever content you're displaying on the screen. So yeah, that's kind of the benefits of doing the structure that I told you for search engine optimization. Accessibility, because not everyone uses a computer have two sets of eyes. Some people are deaf and blind, and you have to work around that. Also, browsers, there are computers that continually try to understand random websites, and if your website is not geared for that kind of best practice structure, you're going to completely ruin it. By the way, I forgot to tell you guys, this presentation is in my website, aparagus.com/stars1. So I have links throughout the presentation. Like, this is just a link to Mozilla Web Dev Docs. I suggest you jump into that if you've never been into HTML. Whatever you do, I completely, I'm advising you not to learn from W3 schools. Everyone in the internet tells you to learn from that, but that is such a bad resource because it's a for-profit company. They care less about the content and they care more about monetizing their website, whereas Mozilla is an actual non-profit, open source organization willing to empower developers with actual correct data. So I suggest you learn from them. I'm going to introduce you to some beginner HTML header tags. You have the title tag, which tells the tab on your browser what the title of your website is, and it also tells search engines what the title of your website is. The script tag, which you can either use to link to external JavaScript files or to code internal inline JavaScript code. You have your link tag, which is meant for linking into external CSS files. I'm going to cover CSS later on. It's the actual where you actually code out the design of your website or your application. The style tag for inline CSS code. The meta, which dictates what search engines relevant information about you. Open Graph, by the way, is the way Facebook scrapes data from your website. I have a link to Open Graph's website. It's a data protocol of how you should structure your markup if you want Facebook to understand your website, because people share links all the time in Facebook. So you want to grab on that opportunity of banking on links. So you need to structure your markup correctly if you want Facebook to respect your data. There's also a Twitter kind of markup. These two are easy things that you add in your meta tags that make these services work around and understanding your website much better. And also you have your meta name equals description and meta name equals author tag, which tells search engines and computers who made the website, which is most probably you, and what your website is about. These are important HTML content tags. There's more to this. I'm just scraping again the very surface. These are what you're going to be using like 90% of the time if you want to jump into HTML. There's H1 through H6. H1 is the title. Usually they call it the title tag. That's if, for example, your website's name is my website. You would wanna identify that inside an H1 tag. Usually browsers render that as the biggest text element in the website or web application, and H6 is the smallest one. Divs are block style elements. They're used for positioning. If you go into some old website, they use positioning. They use tables for positioning, but that's a bad practice. Never get into that. Span tags are for inline elements. That's, for example, you have a sentence and you want to style a certain word in that sentence. Instead of using divs, you would use spans for that. You have A tags, aref, used to link certain pages to other pages. You have your ordered list and unordered list tags used for making lists, like bullets and numbered lists. And you have your tables. Tables are only to be used for creating spreadsheet-like data. Never use it for positioning. I've seen so many people do this. This is a mistake when you're learning. CSS is the design aspect of the web. It's selector driven. You usually create CSS styles with either through classes or through IDs. If you have any questions on that, I'm gonna actually do a mini coding session after I show this kind of slide presentation. So you can kind of get into the code. There's 3 levels of CSS. This is basically like the workable drafts of when CSS came out. CSS1 is the oldest draft that came out about 1999, and that lays out certain things you have to do for typography, margin, border, padding. You have CSS 2.1 for positioning, z-index, which tells the browser how to stack certain elements. Like if you want this element to go above this element, you would say this z-index of this element would be 2. The z-index of the one beneath it would be 1 or -1. And the newest specification is CSS3. That one just came out, so you have to use browser vendor-specific tags. It also tries to fix certain elements that were used to be virtualized in JavaScript. The main point to take away here is, as much as possible, for the design aspect, you want to offload all of that to CSS. Never do any design stuff in JavaScript. One methodology that's important in CSS, because as you code CSS it gets messy, is SMAX, which stands for Scalable Modular Architecture for Cascading Styles. And you usually start with your base styles. Base styles is the code that makes your website compatible across browsers. Browsers implement their own styles to begin with. Usually you don't want those styles, so you want to have a base. You want to clean it up. You want to start with a clean slate. That's what base does. Layout is when you want to have a grid system. Positioning, usually you would put that there. Module is when you have, for example, a header portion of your website or application, or a body portion, or an image portion, stuff like that. State is for A tags and B tags and italics and all of that. Theme is stuff that you would change if, for example, your website is jumping from holiday season to New Year's season to fall, or if you have an e-commerce website. And changing state is, for example, if I hover over some link element, you would code that. And again, I have a link for a CSS beginner resource if you want to jump into it. JavaScript is the logic of the web. It does prototypal inheritance. As I told before, in Java, you do inheritance through classes. In JavaScript, everything is different. Objects inherit from objects. When you're learning JavaScript, the bad thing with JavaScript is that it was coded in the whole language was coded in about a month. It was done in a hurry because Netscape and Microsoft and Java, Oracle, was getting into a legal battle about which language to use in the browser. So this language was kind of just hushed into the system. So it's not necessarily the best language, but I actually just started learning JavaScript. I've always been using JavaScript, but I actually just started learning it for real this summer. Like I actually paid attention to the design patterns and stuff. And I actually would dare say, call it my favorite language now. It used to be PHP. This is a great resource if you're just starting with JavaScript. Elegant JavaScript. It's an online ebook. It's for free. You can do some practices right on the website. Yes?
Do you think we should learn Grunt?
I'm going to cover that later.
Alright.
I personally don't like Grunt. I personally like Gulp. But I'll talk about that later. And I'll also explain what Grunt and Gulp are. Mozilla Developer JavaScript resource, I also have a link for that. Mozilla is really a boon for developer documentation. last but not least, I added a design patterns link to Adi Osmani. He's one of the best JavaScript developers out there. And do you know stuff like modular design pattern or kind of the design patterns you learned? Did your teachers teach that in Java?
Modular design pattern.
Did you learn design patterns? Like factory, those kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
This is what that link basically provides you in Java.
Oh wow.
Now, because a lot of Silicon Valley startups are actually starting up web development languages, certain tools have been built to make your web development life easier and actually fun. You have, of course, Git. Git is not just for web dev. It's for every programming language out there. I advise, if you don't know Git, I advise you to learn it now because it allows you to keep a history of your file changes. It's sadly that I just learned this, like this past April. And before this past April, I used to back up every single piece of code I had manually and zip it. And Git virtually just blows that out of the water. Also, if you know Git, you can do open source contributions in GitHub. And that's like one of the biggest ways to get hired right now because companies are always tracking your Stack Overflow and GitHub accounts for the kind of contributions you do to the community. So the more points you have or the more contributions you've made is definitely a big win. Sass is a way to write CSS in a programming aspect. If you code CSS is not meant for the programmer, it's meant for the designer. You tend to get repetitive with it, but Sass lets you do variables and if statements in Sass, so I advise you to learn that. You have Bower to manage dependencies. So let's say you have jQuery or you have Angular. You typically don't want to handle that on your own. You want Bower to handle that on your own because if, for example, jQuery released a new version of jQuery or Angular does the same thing, Bower easily lets you update to that new breaking feature. This also works in the command line. So imagine the benefits of just typing out certain commands from your command line, then switching back to your IDE, versus going to like GitHub, actually downloading the zip file, and then opening the zip file, then adding that script tag or that CSS into your application. That's just a lot of wasted time. You have Gulp. Gulp is, I actually like Gulp, but Gulp and Grunt are basically the same things. There are ways to automate certain tasks while you're coding. It offers Sass compilation. Sass again is just a shortcut for like writing CSS. It links your JavaScript file, so if you coded your JavaScript code in an incorrect manner, it checks for that mistake.
Oh, can that be put inside as the one? Can I install it as the one?
Usually this runs on a command line.
Oh.
What you want to do is you type in a command line, a certain command to run Gulp. Gulp is installed on a per project basis. Do you know it's kind of like Node.js. Gulp, Bower, and Grunt, all of these run on command line, just like Node.js. You can also wire dependencies. By the way, one thing to get into when you're coding for the web, I advise you get into unit testing. What separates apparently, and this is like one of the main tenets in the Valley, is what separates the okay developer from the good developer is the fact that you unit test your code. So writing code that tests your code. Make sure that you remove as much bugs as you can during development, not production. Other resources, I have a link here to my Trello account. Let me see if this works. Yeah, this is my a Trello board that I make. I like to learn a lot of things. There's this book called The Outliers. They had something about if you want to master something, you have to invest at least 10,000 hours of your life into it. So I try to do at least 5 hours of programming a day. I usually do web dev, so I focus on web dev. But if you want to get into HTML, PHP, or JavaScript, or the tools that I just told you, I have all the links here. Like these are top resources that I've scraped over to somewhere. I also advise if you want to get serious into development to create a Trello account. Have any of you guys watched the Silicon Valley? It's like an HBO show.
I've seen
I was gonna start there.
Yeah. Well, in that show, they have this thing called Scrum, and Trello kind of allows you to do the same thing. Actually, I'm gonna log in and show you guys the kind of things we can do.
Oh, my bad.
I think I have to log you out of your Gmail.
Yeah, whoops.
Is that okay if I log you out?
Yeah, go ahead.
So by the way, this is the venture that I'm starting up with a friend. We have a board for each project that we're making. Like right now, these are the current apps that we're working on. I'm currently coding the mobile app that I just showed you called Coined. And this is what Trello allows you to do if you want to do it this way. You can do to-do lists, future to-do lists, and doing lists. And by the way, the service is for free. Like for me, this is a boom. I can list out certain things that I have to do and code out, and I can check off certain things. And if you just want to get into making your own apps, this is the power of web development. If you want to create your own business, you can always create your own business. You have the power. You don't. Working for someone is not necessarily what you have to do in life. You always have the power of creating your own venture. You just have to be very driven with yourself. And people think that creating a business is hard, but you have to pay like what, $100 to register a business here in the state of Florida. And if you're willing to work hard for like the first few months, years of your life, work as hard as you can, and you can get venture funding and you can fly off. Living your dreams is not hard when you know programming.
True story.
It's kind of motivational.
Let me resume the
No, it's hot water first.
Oh, by the way, I also added a link to Douglas Crawford's website. He's called the Einstein of JavaScript. This guy worked for Yahoo, and he knows almost all the quirks with JavaScript. So I personally like him. I necessarily don't agree with some of his programming views, but Angularjs, by the way, if you get really heavy into JavaScript, I'd advise you first, when you're learning these languages, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, don't go into the route of learning the framework before you learn the language. Actually learn the language, spend time in the language, learn that language like the back of your hand, because if you jump into the framework, you take the easy way out, you're gonna suffer later on. You're gonna code sloppily, you're gonna have quirks that you don't know what's happening. These things are like magic. They do stuff magically for you. Bootstrap also does magic for you. But if you don't know what magic Bootstrap does, what magic AngularJS does, you're gonna have a hard time debugging and fixing your code, and that's just a mess for production. And that's kind of it for the slide presentation. Do you guys have any question or requests?
Give him a donut.
You get a donut.
Alright, so one more one. I got a quick question for you guys.
What is your link for a website, sorry?
My link. By the way, this website, it looks old and stuff because I didn't use any framework in this website, but I coded all of the code you see here natively.
I also built that from scratch. You wrote the CSS for that.
Yeah.
No bootstrap. Wow.
No Bootstrap.
No bootstrap.
If you F12 and you look at all the CSS and HTML code, and you want to learn stuff, you can F12 and view the kind of
It does that. I don't know why.
the kind of code. Bootstrap usually does layouts for you, but I made my own grid system. So if you want to learn, you can always jump. And if you want to ask me any questions, you You can email me at alistairprogess.com. It's just my first name and last name. No spaces or symbols. You can send me a private email and I'll help you with it. People do it all the time.
How do I learn things?
But if you have any questions, you can ask it right now.
You guys have any questions for Alistair? Really? Okay, so I guess the questions were answered, right? Okay, so
he's got one.
So I'm learning Angular right now, right? But my JavaScript is like, I'd say it's like right above beginner. Right above beginner. But it hasn't touched intermediate yet.
Okay.
So should I really dive into Angular? Because I really like what it's doing and stuff.
Actually,
Or should
I kind of had the same ordeal with you.
Yeah.
I went heavy into Angular,
Yeah.
and when I started getting into Angular, I barely knew anything about JavaScript. I only knew what I knew about JavaScript based on other languages. You know, if statements, while loops, variable declarations, jQueries. But what I found is while I was going into Angular, I got annoyed of how much magic Angular was doing that I actually ended up learning JavaScript hand in hand. So I don't know if you want to take that route, but
So learn both at the same
learn
time.
both at the same time. I also advise doing CodeWars.com.
Code work.
It's a very good competitive coding website with JavaScript, and they have some languages like Haskell, but the modules are like just beginning. But the JavaScript part of this section of the website is awesome. You can compete with other people, you can gain points, and what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to get to like the top 10 of the website. There are like 10,000 web developers, 15,000 web developers. I'm trying to get to the top 10.
that's the job right there, right? Just being in that tent.
Windows suck ass.
So I have to ask you guys, do you want to do more detailed versions of what we just did today? Do you want to actually learn?
Yeah.
As long as there's food, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer the coding side.
Yeah.
This side was nice.
I didn't do any coding, but if you guys want more, I'm willing to do it. Go.
20 people said yes from over here.
Okay, sure. Great.
He cloned
So,
himself.
okay, we can definitely make some arrangements to have some more, but for sure.
I guess
That's it? All right, well, thanks, Alistair.